City Councilman Chris Chenoweth from McMinnville. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for taking the time to be a part of this, and really for being willing to serve in a position that a lot of people wouldn't want to or even think about doing on the city council level. Before we get into that, I want to briefly find out who you are other than a city council person. You've been owning AccuPro for a while. Can you just give us a little snippet of what AccuPro is and what you do?
Sure. So in early 96, I came onto the family business, and that's AccuPro Computers here in town. We're an IT company, started as a software house, meaning we offered a software product. It was a medical practice management system for small doctors and clinics and chiropractors and what have you. We had that from the late 80s all the way up to 2000. As I came on board, we transitioned away from the software house, because I am not a programmer and I do not want to be a programmer, into a IT company. So we do small business support. Basically, our sweet spot is companies that are too small to have their own IT department, but too big to do it themselves. We also do support for home users, as well as we help folks that don't want to be sold by a salesperson in a big box store. Whatever's on sale or whatever the clearance item is, we help folks find the perfect computer, laptop, build them the computer, desktop, for their needs.
Wow, great. So you're like the person that comes to the rescue when everything falls apart and the business needs to keep going.
That's correct.
Yeah, among many other things.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you again for your service. Unless, I would have guessed that of all the people who live in the McMinnville area, they don't think about or really know what happens on a day-to-day basis in the city government. And yet we're all affected by it dramatically, probably. And there's so many areas. It's kind of mind-boggling and amazing. And so for your willingness to represent us is awesome. So we might break down a little bit how it works, nuts and bolts from your point of view today. And then later I hope to just take a minute on what seems to be a hot button, and that's a $13 fee that we might see on our water and light bill starting in January, and then end with a little bit more about who is Chris Chenoweth, more from a personal point of view.
Okay.
So first, would you mind telling me from the perspective of a city council person, and how long have you been on the council?
2 years.
2 years. Good for you. What does your typical month look like? Is it meeting after meeting? Are you studying materials constantly? Are you overseeing subcommittees? What does Chris do to get ready for and be a part of these meetings?
So first, thank you very much for having me. I didn't mind my manners and say that yet, but thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome.
A given month has 2 city council meetings that are open to the public meetings, and 1 work session. So the second and fourth Tuesday of the month, we have our regular city council meetings. In those meetings, we give the citizens an opportunity at the outset, 3 minutes. Any citizen can come in and literally talk about anything you want to talk about. You got rats and you're frustrated with rats, you can come talk about rats. You've got problems with chickens from your next door neighbor, you can come tell us about the chickens. Wow. Whatever it is that's frustrating you, or you think you have an idea that might be helpful for the city council to hear, that might be a good input for us, you can come do that. The difference between doing that then versus in an email is it's permanently part of the record. Technically public communications are part of the record, but it's different when it's on a city council record from a public meeting. So that's the second and fourth, and then we cover whatever ordinances we need to cover, whatever decision making we need to make. All that's covered in those second to fourth meetings, second and fourth Tuesday of the month meetings. Often, what comes before us in those meetings is discussion points. So, for instance, we recently just completed the process of passing the 3 Mile Lane area plan. To get to that point, it started with, this is our recommendation of what the plan should look like, brought to us from the Planning Commission. They got it from first a task force of citizens. They tweaked it, made changes, recommendations, sent it on to us. We looked at it, we tweaked it, we opened up for public hearing to allow citizens to come tell us their thoughts. We tweaked it some more. And we had conversations at the dais about what we thought was a good idea. Once we'd gone through all this process, which took over a year, the city provided us an ordinance, which was the 3 Mile area plan. And then we voted on it, it passed it. So it's a process, it takes time.
When you say the city provides you with an ordinance, what does that mean? Who is the city?
The city is all the employees. It's your city manager, your city planner, your the different members of your actual employees that we've hired. Your city council, if I can use a jet plane analysis, your city employees are all of the ground workers and the pilot, perhaps. Well, no, I wouldn't say the pilot. Yeah, I would say the pilot. The pilot, perhaps, and your staffing. The city council sits above all of that. And our job is tasked predominantly to provide policy direction on what we would like to see the city do. The city then implements that. Your pilot implements the plan to fly it. Your stewardesses implement how to feed everybody. All of the detail, your people on the ground are taking care of the luggage. All of that is the different departments of the city working to fulfill what we as a policy board came up with that we wanted to see happen within the city.
So if I wanted to know more about a particular topic, I wouldn't necessarily go to you. I might ask you or go to somewhere in the city, maybe it's that little White House on 2nd Street, and ask who can tell me more about this thing to pick their brain. Is that how it would work, or would I be sent all over town?
Very much so. So, for instance, on the 3 Mile Lane area plan, if you came to me and said, Chris, tell me about it, I would say, okay, this is what I know, and I'd give you the overview. And then I would say, if you want more details, talk to Heather Richards in the planning department, and she can give you all the details. So for stuff I don't know, I would send you there, and they're going to have more information than I would have.
Well, that is good to know. But you are the ones who vote yay or nay on all the materials that everyone else has worked to put together for you.
Correct.
And that's why we elect you.
Right. And I'm also the public facing person. So if you have a problem with what's been done, I'm the interface to try to get something done to change that.
Awesome. If I wanted to, as a resident, analyze the budget and in fine detail, would I be able to go to a particular person and get it? And this is a little bit detailed maybe, but be able to see how much spending has occurred in a particular area over time, and see, and maybe even ask whether or not certain parts of the budget need to be there anymore. This is the small government Todd Butterfield talking, whereas why do we always need to have this and this because we've always had it, versus maybe there's something better, or maybe we can just be more efficient with less. Would I talk to you, or is there anybody else?
So that would depend on your initiative and your time. If you go to the city council website, which is, you just do a search on any engine for McMinnville City Council, and it will take you to the city council website. Actually, I shouldn't send you the city council website. If you go to the city website and go to the budget committee, you can go through and find all of the budgets going back 15 plus years. So if you have the time, the energy, and the wherewithal to go through those budgets, you can get those answers yourself. So that's one way. A second way is you could reach out to the finance director, Jennifer Cuellar, via email and make a request for information. Remember that every communication done in writing to anybody in the city, that would include me, that is of a governmental nature is considered public record. So a person who is interested in getting that kind of information will typically do it via email to establish a public record that this request was made and this was the response that I got. So then that's true with me. So any communication that happens with me that is defined as part of the governmental process, not this interview, but if I were to have a conversation with a constituent and I did it in writing, it's public record, and can be requested at any time. Yeah. So
Okay. It does make me wonder if there could be someone on staff who could do a year by year analysis for us and put it out there, but that would be asking a lot. And I know that everybody's busy with everything that they're already expected to do as a paid staff person. And I'm not trying to lose anybody a job. I just know that my next question about the $13 fee is kind of related to this, because it looks like there was a sense, if for at least a year or two, that there was going to be a big shortfall in the budget to pay for all the people that do what they do. And at some point somebody decided that they were, tell me more about it because I might be way off, and they're even calling it an emergency on the website that is called City Services Charge. There's a spot that explains how they got to this point. Now I painted myself in a corner. I forgot what I was trying to ask.
well, I think you're going, is this a necessary fee? Is that where you're going?
Well,
Or
yeah, I was going to actually ask, are fees taxes, and maybe that's too much of a difficult legal question, but could this fee have been avoided with budget analysis a couple of years ago? Or is it just due to cost of living, and you don't want to cut any department, you don't want to cut any people?
So first off, I would say this is not a fee. This is a tax. And the difference is a fee, you're paying a surcharge for a product or service. Okay. A Mac Water and Light is not charging us this service. The city is putting a flat dollar amount to everybody. You're paying this surcharge. That's a tax. If it was based upon my usage of the electricity, then it could be a fee, but it's not remotely connected to my usage. This is a tax. In my
So are we going to be voting on it?
No, it's
Okay.
already been done. I at the time that this passed, I was the only city councilor who was voicing that we should be putting these kinds of taxes up to a vote of the people, so that the people can say, yes, we want more services, and therefore we're willing to pay for those more services, or increase in services, or not. And that would also require the city to have to make the case as to why they need more money. I actually argued behind the scenes that, if you did this the right way, you might could ask for more money, because if citizens understand why you need more money, they might be willing to give it to you. If you
Yeah.
just take it from them, they get resentful. And I don't know how the citizens are going to feel. I'm not going to argue and say, I know that they're going to vote no on this. I really don't know what they would have.
Right.
But I do know by forcing it down their throats, they're going to be resentful, and it's not going to be a good thing come the next election cycle for those who voted in favor of it once it shows up on their bill. Now, the fact that it's not showing up till January, is frustrating. I would have liked to have seen it before this election so that the voters could have decided between George, who was opposed to this fee, and Zach, who was absolutely in favor of this and a whole lot more. But they didn't get that clear delineation, I don't think. And I think that means we didn't get a referendum on this tax, and I would have liked to have had that.
Go ahead.
So there's that. I am I'm an anti-tax guy. I believe in general states, local governments, federal government have continued to grow the size of their budget proportional to the amount of income that we're earning for the last, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years. Doesn't seem like there's an end in sight to how much money they can spend. And if we don't at some point in time say enough is enough, live with what we've given you, um, we're going to end up in a position where there's just not enough money left to take. Um,
Well, we'll look like the federal government. If only the federal government could be more accountable, but that's another
yeah.
story.
The good news is we can't spend more money than we have at the local level. Um,
Hence the new tax.
Hence the new tax. Although we had a really good surplus that we've blown through a ton of because we've been spending more every year, but it hasn't outpaced the surplus we had built up. So we could do that until we run out of that surplus.
So, did you have a meeting yesterday? And I think we'll come back to. I'm pretty sure if you're willing to come back on the show, this fee and how it's looking to people when they start to see
Sure.
it face to
Yep.
face. You had a meeting yesterday on to continue a moratorium on short-term rental applications. How did that go? What are your thoughts about it?
Well, I'm a small government guy. So anytime we start looking at the government passing laws, I begin to get worried about the consequences of said laws, and what those unintended consequences might look like. Um, and so, yes, there was one counselor who was not present. I believe they voted no. So the procedure on an ordinance, we deal with various different legal terms, but one of them is an ordinance. And the procedure on an ordinance is it has to be voted on twice. It can be voted
Okay.
on twice in the same meeting if the first time it's unanimous. So at our last city council meeting, it was voted on and it was not unanimous. The Jessica Payne, Councilor Payne, who was not present last night, voted no, as did Adam because it was thrown on at the last minute and procedurally he didn't like that. Um, so he voted no, which caused it to go to a second reading, which was last night. Um, at that one, Councilor Payne was not present. Adam went to yes, and I voted no. Um, and I voted no because I am concerned that there are unintended consequences of ending competition in our city on short-term rentals. Um,
And short-term rentals are mostly like somebody's out of town. This is how I see it, and so they might rent their house out, or they might have a room for rent.
no, well, that's some, but short-term rentals can be Airbnbs that are rentals all year round. It just means
Oh,
that means the person who's renting it
gotcha,
is only renting it for a short term.
gotcha.
Um,
And they think that affects the availability of housing in town, but I'm guessing that you don't necessarily see a bright line between those two.
well, our city planner said it didn't have any impact really on our housing.
Ah,
It at this point, I don't remember the number. I want to say we have a total of it was less than 100 short-term rentals in McMinnville.
okay.
Um, and so, no, I didn't see this as an issue that was going to move the needle on the housing problem that we have. And predominantly those who asked for this and wanted this were people that had short-term rentals next door to them. And they didn't like the uh, parties and the whatever happens at a short-term rental. And that was part of my other reason for voting no on this. I have lived next to rentals for the largest portion of my life. And it doesn't matter if it's short term or long term. Sometimes you got good neighbors, sometimes you got bad neighbors. Um, so,
Amen.
quit the NIMBYism and let's just, it's their property. They can do what they want with it. If a person buys it and
Yeah,
wants to have it as a short term rental, that's their business. That's what they bought it for. Um,
yeah,
so
yeah. Because there's laws to deal with the
yeah,
behavior. So why make it more complicated? Well, So I might have missed it. Did it
Yeah,
pass,
I was the only
or the
no
more?
vote.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for
You're
doing that.
welcome.
All right, I know we've used up a good chunk of your time, but I would like to turn a corner for a second and get a little personal with
Okay.
Chris. When did you start to sense that you needed to be involved in government somehow and chose city government? Was it just before you ran for office or long before that?
So I actually, and I think this is something that we all need to be considering. I actually, I went to a church, and the church that I attend at the time did not believe that we should be getting involved in political scrums or politics. They felt like the way that we were going to make a difference in our society is one heart at a time. And I've been, and this isn't to pat myself in the back, but I was kind of a leader. I mean, I'm not like the pastor or the head pastor, but I was a leader in the church, did tons for the church. My life was my church, my family, my business. Um, and we had a transition in pastoral leadership. And then that transition of pastoral leadership came with a change in the leadership of different departments within the church. So some of the things I was doing, like a bus ministry route that I did for 17 years, was handed off to the next generation. Um, and I found myself at the ripe old age of 46 with time on my hands. And I felt a drawing that I wasn't done giving
Yeah.
of myself to my community and to other people. And so there were several events that took place. I won't bore you with the details, but basically, God spoke to me through various different connections. And you're a believer, you understand what I mean by this.
Right.
There's different things that happen where you get affirmation that God's talking to you and wanting you to do something. Um, and so I went to my pastor. One of them was Mary Sterrett was on the side of the road doing a sign rally. And I had a question on who to vote for on a specific race, and I figured of all the people who I recognized, she would know the answer to my question. So I pulled over, um, had a 25-minute conversation that ended with, "You need to run for
Mm,
office, Chris." Uh,
there you
and so
go.
that was one of the many different things that took place. So I went to my pastor. My pastor thought about it, prayed about it, got back to me and said, we haven't done this. But if you feel led to do it, just go ahead. So that was in 2016. It was
Mm,
prompted a lot by the homeless problems we were having in our community at the time. We're seeing them start to come back, but they were really bad then. Um, and it was prompted by a feeling to give back to my community. And plus, I just had my first grandchild born, which added to that wanting to give something to my community that was long lasting for that generation.
exactly. Yes, because this doesn't just affect our own personal lives; it affects
Yeah,
everybody. So it to me, it's an awesome
yeah.
ministry.
Um,
One of many ways that Christians can
and I
serve.
think we need to. I think, for too long, the refrain has been there's a couple things I think need to change. One of them is don't talk politics, don't talk religion. Um, in the workplace or wherever you're at, don't do it. I think that was a mistake because what it did is
Oh
it
yeah.
ended our ability to talk civilly because we didn't get any practice at it. Um, so I think that was one mistake we made. The other thing is Christians said politics is ugly, and it's a nasty word. It's almost a four-letter word, even though it's not. And we shouldn't get dirty with this stain of politics.
Mm,
I think the reason it got there is because we had walked away. Uh, if you
hmm.
have good people running for office, good quality, charactered, moral people running for office, then guess what? It's not a stain. So
Amen.
we need to get back in the game. Um,
For sure.
so
Well, I'm sure glad you did. That was an awesome story. I can't add or take away from it at all. Chris, do you have any leisure or hobby activities, or is this it?
This is right now kind of a leisure hobby, although I have a
Yeah,
dog. And that dog,
that's okay.
are you a cat person?
We have 3 cats, no
Yeah.
dogs. Long
I
story.
was a cat person. And maybe off air, I'll tell you the story of how I ended up becoming a dog person. But at any rate, I now have a Lagodo Romagnolo, um,
Uh,
which is an Italian water dog. This
cool.
particular breed was bred for truffle hunting in Italy. Uh,
Oh,
and
wow.
so I am going to eventually train her to be a truffle hunter. I already do chanterelle hunting for chanterelle mushrooms, and I like hiking up to alpine lakes and fishing for small trout. So those are the things I do on leisure.
Nice. Well, if we have you back, I would love to see a picture of the dog and maybe some lakes and some
Yeah, there you
trout.
go.
That'd be awesome. Chris, thank you. God bless you for what you're doing and for being on my initial episode. Future episodes will include Yamhill County Commissioner Mary Sterrett, State Representative Lucetta Elmer, and local active citizen, musician, and garbage man George Humley. Do you know of a story that needs to be reported, a person who needs to be heard? Let me know and write to me at truthseekeroregon@gmail.com.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of these United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And to my country I make my pledge to always love, protect, and defend her. And we the people across this land, one nation under God.